Following the first sack of Rome in 390 BC, the city stood in ruins. A fire that was started by the Gauls destroyed most, if not all, buildings in the city. Surrounded by the ashes, people could ask only one question: to leave and forget, or to stay and rebuild. While the Senate was discussing this pressing issue, a troop of soldiers were returning from patrol. When they reached the forum, the lead centurion proclaimed, "Hold, standard bearer, it will be best for us to stop here." Ever superstitious, the senators took this as a clear omen from the gods. The matter was settled. Romans will not leave their homes, and repairs would commence immediately. Following his victory over the Gauls, Camillus was proclaimed Romulus, the second founder of the city. Although the barbarian army had perished, the city was still in danger. Tribunes of the plebs urged the people to abandon Rome and move to Veii. "Why," they said, "should we rebuild these ruins if abandoned yet perfectly good homes stood in Veii?" The people, exhausted by the lengthy siege, were in favor of this proposal. Camillus, recognizing the danger of these words, refused to lay down his dictatorship. His first order of business was purifying and restoring the temples and the holy grounds desecrated by the Gauls. He then instituted Capitoline Games to celebrate Roman victory. These games would be held even in the time of the empire. After dealing with religious matters, Camillus turned to the tribunes and the people. His impassioned speech about staying in Rome moved everyone that listened to it, and public opinion changed. It was then that the omen was sent to the senators and the matter was finally settled. What followed was a frantic process of rebuilding. People grabbed whatever building materials they could find laying around and started building wherever they saw fit. Roman camps and settlements were famous for their grid layouts, straight streets, and right angles. But Rome itself couldn't be farther from this. The city that grew from the ashes was a tangled mess with winding streets and scattered neighborhoods. The general layout could still be recognizable to this day, more than 2.5 millennia later. The famous Servian Wall, although attributed to the king Servius Tullius, was also built at this time. The walls would soon lose their strategic importance, as the overcrowded city started overflowing around them. But some small sections of the walls survive to this day. A famous expression states, "Rome wasn't built in a day," but the historical core of the city was certainly built within this generation. Rebuilding of the city was further hampered by the ancient enemies hoping to kick Rome while it was down. Every so often the people had to drop everything they were doing to defend the city. The Equians, the Hernicans, the Volscians, the Etruscans, and even the Latins, still bitter over the defeat at the Battle of Lake Regillus, rose up and challenged Rome. But with Camillus at the head of the legions, every enemy was swiftly dealt with, and the Romans could return to their work. With all this rebuilding taking place, people started defaulting on their loans. The debt crisis, the mainstay of Roman politics, reared its ugly head once more. This time the people found their champion among the patricians. Marcus Manlius Capitolinus, who defended the capital during the siege, was angry that Camillus was hogging all the glory from that victory. He recognized that the people were his opportunity for taking control over the city. He started repaying the loans of defaulting debtors and offering interest-free loans to anyone who asked. This made him an instant celebrity with the plebs. His following grew large enough to threaten peace in the city. He began inciting them to rebel against the Senate and the consular tribunes. He was repeatedly proclaiming that the plebs had strength in numbers and could easily overtake the patricians. This was a step too far, and he was tried for treason. Famously, his trial was held in the shadow of the Capitoline, where only a few years prior he earned his nickname Capitolinus. When the charges were brought against him, he extended his arm to the Capitol and reminded the people of his actions on that fateful night. Sensing that the people were moved by his words, the trial was adjourned and relocated to a different part of town, from where the Capitol could not be seen. Now, unable to rouse the emotions of the people, he was sentenced to death. He was hurled from the Tarpeian Rock, ironically losing life only a couple of feet away from where he earned his acclaim. Having dealt with Manlius, the Romans were free to continue their wars. Whether it was dealing with the rebelling colonies, treacherous allies, or longtime enemies, Romans would time and time again turn to Camillus. Although an old man by now, his charisma and tactical brilliance were still unparalleled in the city, and his string of victories continued. Whilst the armies were successful in the field, trouble was again brewing at home. A prominent patrician, Marcus Fabius Ambustus, had two daughters. The elder daughter was married to a patrician and the younger to a plebeian. The younger daughter grew envious of her older sister, as she would never enjoy the same respect, only due to her husband's humble origins. Ambustus was determined to end this imbalance once and for all. He allied with her husband Gaius Licinius and Lucius Sextius, both prominent young men but plebeians by birth. The three of them were set on opening the consulship for the plebs. Licinius and Sextius got themselves elected as tribunes of the plebs and started pushing for change. 3 items were on their agenda. The first aimed at resolving the debt crisis by limiting the interest payments on loans. The second was aimed at limiting the amount of land held by any one person. The third, and most important, would permanently stop elections of consular tribunes and allow the election of plebeians to the office of consul. This third law would guarantee political equality between the classes. Passing any one of these laws would be a monumental achievement, but passing all 3 was near impossible. For 10 years in a row, Licinius and Sextius were elected tribunes of the people. They used their power of veto freely, and for 5 years prevented elections of other consular tribunes. Public life in Rome was brought to a standstill. The first 2 laws were eventually passed, but the third was fought hardest by the patricians. It was in their 10th year in office, in 367 BCE, that Camillus was appointed dictator for the 5th and final time. A large band of Gauls have again descended down the Italian peninsula. This time the Romans were ready, and the barbarians were easily routed. Returning to Rome, he sided with the plebs and persuaded the Senate to yield the popular demand. The final law was passed, and Lucius Sextius was elected as the first plebeian consul. As a compromise, the office of praetor was created. Praetors were in charge of running the city while the consuls were away leading the army, and for now they were exclusively patricians. This is the final time Marcus Furius Camillus will make an appearance in our story. He would die only a few years later in a plague that decimated the Roman population. It's believed that this standoff between the patricians and the tribunes was imagined by later authors who were inspired by events of their times, namely the Gracchi brothers, who used their veto powers to enact reforms in favor of the people. They used this episode as an excuse for missing magisterial election records used for dating past events. Lex Licinia Sextia, as these laws would later be known, is also questioned. Modern analysis shows that almost 1/3 of the consuls prior to this event were plebs, although there is a noticeable increase of plebeian consuls after 367 BCE. However, the existence of a later law stating that one of the consuls must be a pleb, passed in 342 BCE, is not disputed. Through his 6 consular tribuneships and unprecedented 5 dictatorships, Camillus was unquestionably the leader of Rome. His impressive resume consists of conquering Rome's greatest rival, rescuing the city from the barbarians, refusing to leave the city after the sack, and defeating countless opportunistic invaders. Although it's generally believed that later historians embellished his life and career to make him a prelude to the great Scipio of Africa, who would deliver Rome from Hannibal 150 years later. For example, his expulsion from the city is thought to be a fabrication to provide him with an alibi for not defending the city from invasion. Rome had recovered with admirable speed, from the brink of extinction to regaining its status as the dominant force in the area in only a single generation. Join us next time as we discuss the start of a conflict that will engulf the whole of Italy in a war, fighting on one side or the other.